Hi, everybody. I put the instructions for the final completed 6 pages in this March 23rd folder because this is something you're going to be wanting to work on all along so that you're able to get it completed by the first week of May. So in this video, I'm going to go over the instructions for this project. I've also included the instructions in the folder. Please do not wait until the last minute to do these, or you'll just find yourself in trouble. But having said that, I want you to wait until I have a chance to look at your 6 pages of your storyboard panels before you begin. If I just see anything that's glaringly obvious that needs to be corrected in the composition, I'll do that. And then I'll send those comments to you. You're just gonna have to give me a little time to do that, since each and every one of you is gonna be sending me 6 pages of the storyboard panels. So when you get ready to do your 6 pages, these 6 pages, they have to be drawn on Bristol board. Don't turn in the 6 pages on sketch paper. This is these are your professional drawings. These 6 pages must be sequential, and what you're going to do is you're going to follow the order of your storyboard pages. However, if you feel the need to add or change things in your story that reflect differently than the storyboard assignment, then go ahead. Like, for example, when you drew it, like when you drew the storyboards, you might suddenly, as you're transferring these to the 6 final drawings, you might think, oh my God, I left out something. And then you can make that correction and insert it. Each of the 6 pages that you're going to turn in, they must have 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch border around the edge of the page. You're going to try to keep this border clean. Having this border is super important, especially if, like, you want to eventually have this printed. What happens when they print, like, they can do flush a full page, but if you don't have a border and you go all the way to the edge of the page, sometimes when they print it, it'll cut off like about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So you don't want to lose anything essential. That's why I'm making you have a border. Okay. This is going to be a lot of information for you to take in. It's also in the instructions, but I'm going over this because maybe for some people it'll make it more clear. Your story needs to be clear and logical. You have a lot of stuff in your head about your story, but you can't assume that everyone that reads it has this exact same information. So if somebody other than you can't understand what's happening in the story when they read it, then it's not clear and logical. So if you want to run it by like somebody that doesn't have the coronavirus or has not been exposed to it, and you want to let them read it, get their take on whether it makes sense or not. So when you draw the 6 pages, you need to draw them in pencil first. Later on, after you get them drawn in, then you're going to ink them in. You have to ink them in at the very least. If you want to use gray tones or colors, you may. Just remember to make sure there's enough contrast between the tones or colors. Like if you stand back and you look at your image and you squint your eyes and everything blends together, there's not enough contrast. Before you start inking in, make sure you pencil in the text. And after you pencil in the text, then pencil in the speech bubble. Because if you put the speech bubble in first and then you try to fit the text in, it might be too crowded. And also make sure that, I'm going to go over to the speech bubble stuff in a minute, but also make sure that when you put the speech bubbles in and the text in, Make sure that they work well together with the composition. You don't want to take away from your composition. You don't want to have text that goes over something important in your drawing. So once you get your images and your text drawn in pencil, and if you want me to look at them before you ink them in, then send them to me as JPEGs via Blackboard message. Now, if you wait until the end of April to send these to me, I'm not going to have time to look at them. So make sure you send them to me as you go along, and realize I'm human, and I don't sleep with my computer next to my head. So give me time to look at stuff. So then, if you make mistakes on these final pages, correct them. You can correct them with whiteout. If you have to start all over from scratch on a page, start all over from scratch. If you have to redraw a panel and reattach it, do this. Don't turn in messy work. Don't turn in work full of mistakes, because if you do, that's going to reflect on your grade. So each individual panel must be well balanced, and the entire page of panels must be well balanced. I'm going to continue this thought on the next slide. And I'm also, like, after I go over this, I'm going to show you examples. So remember, a well-balanced picture has an even distribution of basic formal elements that lead your eye around the page. I'm going to list what these are in a minute. Also, when you consider balance, think about how your speech bubbles, they can contribute to it, or they can take away from that balance and make it unbalanced. So you got to think about where you place them. The panels and the entire page must have a repetition throughout the image of at least 4 separate basic formal elements. And what are basic formal elements? These are things that we learned about in class. These could include directional lines, implied lines, lines of sight, overlapping, pattern, texture, repetitions of blacks, whites, and or grays, repetitions of shapes such as circles, triangles, squares, rectangles. So for example, like your people might all have round heads. Those are circles. There might be buildings in the background. Those are usually squares or rectangles. You can have a repetition of curved or angular lines. You can repeat the way you depict space. So in several panels, you can have a repetition of 1 or 2 point linear perspective throughout the whole page. So it's not going to be super hard to come up with 4 things that repeat throughout the image. I'm going to give you some examples now. So in this image, there's a repetition of this blue-gray tone. It's here, 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 it's everywhere. There's a repetition of black. Black is here, black is here, black is here, black is here, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here. It leads you all the way around. There's a repetition of rectangular shapes. The buildings. Here's the buildings, the sign, the bricks, the buildings, the sidewalk, the signs, the buildings, the bricks, even though these are angles, those are like rectangular shapes, even the pleats in this woman's skirt and the diamonds on her purse, and the diamonds on this, they all repeat that shape, so that shape leads you all the way around. Then let's look at lines of sight. He's looking down, which leads us over to here. He's looking up, which leads us up to here. He's looking at him, which leads us to him, but also down to here. He's looking this way, which leads us to this. She's looking this way. He's looking this way. He's looking this way. He's looking this way. Because of all those different directions of the repeating lines, it makes us look at the whole picture, those repeating lines of sight. Then there are tons of repeating directional and implied lines. Remember, directional lines are lines that start in one place and stop when they touch something. Here, this is a directional line that starts under the awning, stops when it comes to the woman. This is a directional line that starts at the top of the page and stops when it comes to the guy. This is a directional line that starts here and stops at the guy. This directional line starts here and stops at the door. So there's like a million of these, and if you distribute them evenly throughout, that doesn't mean you have to do the same amount in one place, but you need to have them where they are everywhere in the picture. So then there's implied lines too, like his hat's pointing to here, his hat's pointing to here, the sign's pointing to here, the steeple's pointing up, the corner of the building is pointing to him, the fire hydrant is pointing to the truck's pointing to him, but the fire hydrant's also pointing to this lady, the door's pointing over to here, the man's hats, the people's hats are pointing in a different direction, the scarf's pointing in a different direction, and that's a repeating basic element. Then there's a repetition of overlapping. Everything's overlapping, overlapping, overlapping. This particular image uses 1-point linear perspective. So it actually uses 2, but we're just going to concentrate on 1. These lines that are going here indicate that there's a vanishing point somewhere over here. These lines that are at an angle indicate there's a vanishing point somewhere over here. These lines that are at an angle and they get closer together, they indicate that there's a vanishing point somewhere. So all these images, while they use 2-point linear perspective, but we haven't really covered that, they certainly use 1-point linear perspective. Now here's a simpler drawing that's done just in ink. It just has black and white. So here's something that repeats: the texture of his hair, the texture of her hair, the texture of her hair, the texture of her hair, texture, 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 texture. The shape of the leaves repeat, shape of the leaves, shape of the leaves. The leaves are in every single one of these. There are patterns that repeat. There's a pattern on a shirt, 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 shirt. The patterns in every single panel. There's also directional lines and implied lines, but I think you get that, and there's lines of sight. So I think you get it from this other example, how those repeat. There's also repetition of white in every single panel and black in every single panel. So that's what I mean. And there's a repetition of overlapping in all of these panels. So that's what I mean by the repetition of the basic formal element needs to be distributed so that you follow it through all the panels. Okay, so when you do the speech bubbles, they must contribute to the composition rather than take away from it. In other words, they can't be all pointing down to the ground, or they can't cover up important parts of the composition of the drawing. They have to be legible. I have to be able to read them. You're not going to be there, since we're doing this stupid like online learning in the studio class, which I hate more than anything in the world. But if you're not right next to me and I can't read your speech bubble, then I can't read it and it's not legible. Try to use correct spelling. You're unsure how to spell a word? Look it up. Don't have a bunch of wasted space around the text, or don't have the text to come too close to the edge. I misspelled "to" there. Don't have it so that it touches the edge of the panel. If you're using tails, which I hope you are, those tails need to lead the reader in the right directions from panel to panel to panel. How about that comma misplaced? If a person speaks first, then their speech bubble needs to be higher than the next person's. Oops, I forgot my possessive apostrophe. Don't overcrowd important aspects of the drawing. So that's, oops, I guess that's it. That's pretty much it. If you are unsure about things, like about speech bubbles, I have the PowerPoint on that. I have the instructions on it. I have videos. All this stuff is on our Blackboard page. But from now on, we're going to be using these folders, okay? So there's this assignment of the cover that I gave you on the 23rd. And on the 30th, I'm going to give you an assignment on the back cover. And then hopefully we won't have to do this too much longer. It's all very depressing. Seriously, I love seeing my students even when you annoy me. So I'm not gonna cry. So I'll talk to you soon. Alrighty, that's it. I can't get this to close.